Hello, my name's Tim Shoebridge, and what you just heard there were some gentle undulations from a new user oscillator that I've just developed for the Korg Minilogue XD called 2. By the way, there will be a prologue version very soon. I'm actually working on it right now. So why have I called this new user oscillator 2? It's because it builds upon the principle of taking two totally separate and discrete waveforms and combining them to create something new. And I'll show you right now exactly what I mean. Right, so this user oscillator, there's quite a lot going on with it. It's quite a lot to describe, so I am resorting to some little diagrams to help explain what's going on. So basically this oscillator supports 4 basic waveforms: sine wave, triangle, sawtooth, and square wave. In fact, it's an inverted sawtooth, but it's a sawtooth. So the user oscillator will combine these different waveforms 2 at a time. So let me show you what I mean. Let's just take, say, the triangle and the sawtooth and see how it combines those 2 waveforms. Basically what it does is, on a per cycle basis, it first takes the first waveform and then the second, then the first, then the second, then the first, then the second, going on for forever. So that's how it's combining it. It's not combining it the same way that your synthesizer would combine 2 separate oscillators and mix the audio signals together. It's actually doing it on a per cycle basis. So if I just sort of like show you there with a different color the first waveform, you can see how it's combining those 2 waveforms together to create something completely different. Let's take another example. Let's take the sawtooth and the square wave. And again, we take the first waveform, then the second, then the first, then the second, then the first, second, etc., etc., etc. And as you'll see, we get a completely unique and interesting waveform out of it. So how many different combinations are there that the user oscillator supports? Well, if we just take the sine wave on its own, we can combine it with itself. That'll obviously just give us a normal sine wave. We can combine it with the triangle, we can combine it with the saw, and we can combine it with the square. So we're actually getting 4 different combinations just with the sine wave. And if we look at that across all of the waveforms, we'll have our sine wave combinations, our triangle combinations, sawtooth, and our square wave. So we have 16 total combinations of waveforms to choose from with this user oscillator. There are some similarities between them. We'll see, for example, we've got sine with triangle in this first block, and then we've got triangle with sine, but there is a reason why there's that duplication when it comes to modulation of these waveforms, and I'll show you that a little bit later. But first of all, I think the best thing to do is to actually show you how to select these different combinations using the user oscillator and actually what they actually sound like. So that's what I'm going to do next. Okay, so here we have the Monilogue XD. It's running the 2 user oscillator, and by default we get just a sine wave, which is the very first of those 16 waveform combinations. The way to choose other combinations is to use the shape control in conjunction with this shift button here on the far right. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to hold down a key so that we can see the waveform. Now I'm going to hold down the shift button, and when you hold down the shift button, it pops up this little menu showing different commands that are available with the shift button down. We'll ignore that and we'll just turn this shape control. And as you'll see, as I start to turn it, now we've got sine plus triangle, sine plus saw, sine plus square. Now we have triangle plus sine, triangle plus triangle, triangle plus saw, triangle plus square, etc. all the way through those 16 different combinations ending in square wave. Now the reason why I've chosen to use the shift button with the shape is that it's not modulatable. and I want to use the shape control on its own, which is modulatable, for something else, and I'll show you that now. So let's just go back to, let's say this one, which is sine wave plus triangle, and what I'm going to do is just turn this shape control and show you the effect on the waveform. But before I do that, I'm just going to turn off the display of the parameter value so that we can just see the waveform here and nothing else. So now if I hold down a note and turn the shape, you'll see that what's actually happening is that second waveform, the triangle in this case, is actually moving. It's basically its phase is changed by the shape control. So it actually moves to the left, and a new triangle appears. The sine wave, the primary wave, is unaffected. It's just the secondary wave that's moving. But it's moving in such a way that the actual sort of the overall frequency of the waveform stays the same. So it's the same note that I'm playing. And obviously that sound and the waveform that you get as you are modulating is going to be different for each of those 16 different combinations. Let's just quickly choose a different combination. I've turned off the display so we can't see it, but let's go to the far right where we get a square wave, and let's do the same shape mod thing. It's quite similar to pulse width modulation, but it's not quite the same because it's every second wave that's actually moving and not all of them together. So I'm just going to go back and just change that setting so that we can see parameter values. What I'm going to do is come back to this one, the sine plus triangle wave, and we'll try modulating this shape control, which we can do. We can modulate the shape using the LFO here on the front panel. So switch it to shape. Let's choose triangle for the LFO, normal. Let's turn these guys down to start with. Let's have a slow rate for the LFO to start with. I'll hold down a note and then turn up the LFO. Right, now as well as the shape control and the ability to modulate it on the front panel, there are a number of parameters that you can configure with this oscillator. The normal way, through edit mode, then choose program edit, and then click on this button. And the first of those parameters is called slop. Just like with the previous user oscillator that I developed called 1, this one has got multiple digital oscillators inside it. 3 digital oscillators, and by using the slop amount you can sort of like randomly detune those oscillators from each other. So I'll just show you that. that slop. Okay, so as well as the slop parameter, we've got 5 more parameters that we can use with this user oscillator, and all 5 of those parameters relate to an envelope generator that I've built into this user oscillator. So with the one user oscillator, I built a little simple LFO inside that user oscillator to help modulate the shape and free up the LFO on the front panel for other duties. With this particular user oscillator too, I've implemented an envelope generator, and I'll show you what those parameters are now. First one is EG amount, the amount that the envelope generator will modulate the shape. Then we've got an attack, a decay, a sustain, and then the last parameter is called EG mode, and I'll explain EG mode in a little while, but you'll notice that there's no release parameter, and that's because this is not a full ADSR, it's an ADS, whereas the decay is not just the decay part of the slope, it's also the release as well. So there is a release aspect to this envelope, but it has to be the same as the decay amount. That's just a limitation because of the number of parameters that I've got here available to me. So let's just get that envelope working. I'll set the amount to, I don't know, 50% say. We'll give it an initial attack, say 10%, and then we'll give it a decay, so 15. We'll leave the sustain down to 0, and I'll come to that EG mode later. So now, let's just make sure that this LFO is off. If we now press a key, you'll see that there's an attack and a decay, and then the modulation stops. If I were to make the attack really quite short, let's say 3%, that initial modulation is quicker. Let's go down to actually as fast as it can go, which is 1%. So if I actually make them both as short as possible, 1% each, this is as fast as we can get this envelope to go. Okay, so let's just talk about that mode parameter now. The parameter at the end. There's a number of different values. One is this default behavior of modulating the shape and the envelope generator just being a normal envelope generator. But we can change that value, and value number 2 is make the envelope generator loopable, or the attack, the decay portion of the envelope loopable. So if we set this to 2 and now hold down a note, we'll see that we have effectively an LFO. Okay, so the main advantage of having an envelope generator built into the user oscillator is it can free up the LFO here for other modulation duties. So let's just try modulating the cutoff frequency with the LFO while having the shape being modulated by the envelope generator inside the oscillator. So let's just set that up now. Let's add a little bit of EG, some gentle attack and decay. Sustain we don't care about because we're going to have the mode as 2, which is loopable. Let's actually have it slower than that. no shape mod, and this is with. Right, so there's one final thing to really explain about this user oscillator, and it's in terms of its modulation capabilities, and we really haven't touched on it yet. But if we just recap what we've touched on so far, we've basically got an envelope generator, which has got two modes so far. It's either got normal, sort of like one-shot mode, or it's got a loopable mode. But in both cases, it is modulating the amount of shape that's applied to the waveform. Now, as well as modulating the shape with that envelope generator, we could also modulate it with the LFO here on the front panel at the same time. And if we did that, we would get an additive effect, which is quite sort of like normal with synthesizers, where you can have multiple modulations of the same destination. So let's just try that out so that we can hear what it sounds like. I'm just going to go in and set some EG, let's say 50%, a slow attack, a slow decay, keep sustain down to 0, and let's loop it. So we go to EG mode 2. So that's the effect of our EG. Let's add this LFO into it as well. So we'll choose shape. Let's set everything down. I'll actually give it quite a fast rate to start off with, and I'll introduce the value here. So we have sort of typical additive behavior of the envelope generator, which is looping, and the LFO, which is looping as well. And obviously you can get really quite subtle, interesting modulation effects by having them at a fairly similar sort of rates, slow rates, but not quite the same, not quite matching. You get some really nice undulations in the modulation. However, that's not all that we can do here. We've actually got a couple more values for this EG mode. So one is a one-shot EG, 2 is a looped EG, but we've also got values 3 and 4. Again, 3 is a one-shot EG and 4 is a looped EG, but the modulation effect of the LFO and the EG combined are different. So with 1 and 2, the LFO and the EG have an additive effect. But when we go to 3 and 4, the LFO no longer modulates the shape directly, it modulates the speed of the EG, which is modulating the shape. So here we have the ability to change the rate of the EG using the LFO here on the front panel, and I'll show you that now. So let's go with EG mode 4, which is the envelope is going to be looping. I'll turn down this LFO to start off with. So we just have the EG running, and now what I'm going to do is have a slow rate on this LFO to start off with and start to introduce it. So you can hear there that the rate of the envelope generator as it's looping is slowing down and speeding up, and slowing down and speeding up, and that's because it's the LFO here on the front panel that is affecting the speed of that EG. So that is just the LFO in its sort of like standard sort of like triangle waveform, but we can get some interesting effects if we were to say use the square or the sawtooth. Okay, so I put together some presets to give you an idea of the kind of sounds that you can get out of this User Oscillator. Quite a few of them are using the modulations in a very subtle kind of way. That's the kind of sounds that I like to make anyway. I think there's about 12 presets in total. I'll just give you a very sort of quick idea of what they sound like. So this is the first one. The third one. This is the sound that I played at the very beginning of the video. Here's the fourth one. Fifth one. Number 6. Number 8. Number 9. And the last one.